What if I told you that the CEO of your company, a pack of wild wolves, and like the orbit of the Milky Way itself, we're all running on the exact same line of code?
It's a pretty massive thing to try and visualize right out of the gate.
It really is. I mean, I want you to really think about that for a second because we normally compartmentalize our world to make sense of it, right?
Yeah.
You have human politics on one side of the room,
Yeah.
and you have, I don't know, astrophysics or biology on the completely opposite side.
Yeah, you keep them in their own neat little boxes.
Exactly. But today, we're looking at a worldview that claims your life, your career, and the entire universe are locked into this single inescapable blueprint. And it basically argues that attempting to change your destiny isn't just difficult, it's literally an attempt to break the laws of physics.
Which is an incredibly imposing framework to try and wrap your head around because, this philosophy collapses everything we think of as separate, independent disciplines into one massive churning mechanism. Like sociology, biology, astronomy. There is absolutely no separation between the micro and the macro here.
And that is exactly the premise of the source material we are pulling apart today. We're looking at a translated philosophical and theological text, and it's simply titled, "Everything is in Order, and the Greatest Creator is the Maker of Order."
It's a short text, but wow, is it dense.
It is so dense.
Uh,
So our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct how this author builds an argument that absolutely everything from the very, mundane reality of human digestion all the way up to the fate of an entire nation follows this rigid divine script.
But before we go any further into the architecture of this worldview, we really need to set some explicit ground rules for how we're approaching this material today.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because this source text relies very heavily on theology. It operates on the absolute assumption of predestination, and it relies entirely on the existence of what it calls a greatest creator. So for you listening, it's important to know our goal today is not to endorse these claims.
Right, we're not taking sides here.
Exactly. We aren't here to debate their spiritual validity or push a specific belief system. We're taking a purely analytical approach. I mean, think of us as structural engineers looking at the blueprints of a very strange building.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, we just want to impartially deconstruct the author's logic, examine the mechanisms of their arguments, and really just understand the universe exactly as it is presented in this specific text.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the logic of this system actually doesn't begin with some grand sweeping vision of the cosmos. The author grounds the argument right here on Earth, looking directly at how human beings organize themselves.
Right, starting with the very familiar.
Yeah. The worldview here is built on the assertion that human society is bound by these strict, non-negotiable hierarchies. For example, the text claims a country can only have one president.
And if you somehow try to have two, the country just inevitably fractures.
Yes, exactly. It points out that if 10 different companies merge into one massive global corporation, the end result is always one single CEO. It's never a 10-person committee with equal power. Subordinates must obey superiors. Employees obey bosses. This rigid structure is what the text labels the order.
And that framing requires a pretty crucial philosophical leap, honestly. Because a modern person might look at a corporate merger and assume, well, having one CEO is just an efficient business practice we developed over time.
Or they look at a presidency and say, that is just the system established by our Constitution. We made it up.
Right. But the author completely rejects that premise. The text acknowledges that, yes, humans write laws and we draft corporate charters,
Right.
but it insists that humans are absolutely not the architects of the order.
We're just living in it.
Yeah. The underlying logic here implies that any rule humans create must conform to human nature and the basic foundational norms of the universe. In this view, we aren't inventing a corporate hierarchy.
We're discovering it.
Exactly. We are just discovering a pre-existing law and legally codifying a system that the greatest creator already put into place.
But see, that is where I immediately hit a wall of logical friction with this premise. Because the argument is that no matter how brilliant or progressive a society is, they can't successfully establish an order with two presidents, because having one leader is a divine, unbreakable law.
Right. That's the claim.
But if it's truly an unbreakable law of the universe, why does a human being even have the capacity to try and break it? I mean, let me use gravity as an analogy.
But gravity.
Gravity is an unbreakable physical law. We don't have to write a constitutional amendment forbidding humans from floating away into the clouds because we literally lack the physical capacity to violate gravity.
You don't need a law against floating.
Right. If I step off a roof, I don't get a warning, I just fall.
Yeah.
So if having one CEO is just as divine and unbreakable as gravity, why do humans have the capacity to even attempt a different structure? Why do we need the author to warn us about something that is supposedly impossible?
Well, what's fascinating here is the author has to do some heavy lifting to answer exactly that tension. And they do it by pointing away from human intellect entirely. The text basically asks you to look past all the complications of human society and just observe raw biology.
Okay, so going back to nature.
Yeah. The author lists out this series of natural structures. They talk about a colony of ants, a hive of bees, a herd of goats, a pack of wolves, and even early human clans. And the common denominator.
One leader.
Exactly. In every single one of those natural structures, there is only one head, only one alpha or queen. So, to address your gravity analogy, the author implies that this one leader principle actually is the gravity of social organization.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And human intellect just creates this sort of evolutionary static, right? It makes us think we can outsmart the gravity. So you might use your intellect to temporarily set up a two-headed wolf pack or a two-president country, but the natural biological law will violently assert itself.
I'm going to pull you back down to earth.
Yeah, exactly. It causes the pack or the country to split until that one leader rule is forcibly restored.
So the whole premise rests on the idea that human intellect is totally subordinate to biological mechanics. Like, we think we're making this complex political choice, but really we're just a scaled-up ant colony fulfilling a biological imperative.
Precisely. I mean, the author is completely stripping away the ego of human civilization here. We put a business suit on it and we call it a CEO, but it's the exact same mechanism as the queen bee in a hive.
That is wild. And if human society is just a macro version of a wolf pack following a divine rule, that really makes me wonder about the micro level. What does this actually mean for the individual?
Well, it gets very personal very quickly.
Right, because the text doesn't just stop at governments and corporations. It takes this rigid framework and applies it intimately to personal destiny and human biology. It outlines this completely inevitable biological progression: fetus, baby, adolescent, young adult, middle-aged, menopause, old age, and finally death.
And they use the most basic stuff to prove it.
They do. It emphasizes the most mundane realities to prove its point. It explicitly notes that being hungry requires eating, and eating requires excretion. These are framed as undeniable orders that operate entirely without human consent.
And that lack of consent, that's the foundational pillar for one of the most provocative concepts in the source material. This is where the text introduces the idea of the program of life.
The life program.
Yeah. The logic is that just as your stomach is programmed to require food and expel waste without you having to consciously direct it, your entire existence, I'm talking your career, your relationships, your successes, and your failures, they all operate on a predetermined trajectory.
So it's all mapped out.
Every single person is running a highly specific, individualized life program, and that program is completely immune to human intervention. You can't touch the code.
And the author doesn't shy away from how brutal that sounds in practice either. Like, the text brings up parental expectations to illustrate this, which I thought was really striking.
Oh yeah, the parental part is harsh.
It is. Because every parent hopes their child will become wildly successful. They spend time and money, they pay for college, they try to shape that child's future to bring honor to the family.
And the text just bluntly dismisses all of that effort.
Completely. It states that parental hope is meaningless.
Yeah.
A child is going to live strictly according to their own assigned life trajectory, regardless of what the parents do. The author claims this hidden program is the sole reason why one sibling might become a massive success while the other struggles.
It's all just the code running its course.
But wait, if subjective will have my own hard work, my desires, my late-night studying, if none of that can change my life trajectory by even a fraction of an inch, what does the author think is the point of human ambition?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I am basically just a passenger on a train pretending I'm steering, doesn't this entirely dismantle the concept of free will?
The author completely dismantles it, yes. But they do it with a very specific, almost comedic rhetorical strategy to explain why free will cannot exist.
Okay, how so?
Well, the text argues that if subjective will actually worked, if wanting something badly enough could alter reality, the universe would instantly tear itself apart. The author writes that if will determined your trajectory, Pigs and dogs would become humans, and everyone could become an emperor.
So the proof that free will doesn't exist is basically that the universe hasn't collapsed into chaos from everyone just trying to be the boss.
That is the exact mechanism of the argument. I mean, think about the nature of human desire for a second. If you could simply will yourself to the top of the hierarchy, everyone would choose the maximum level of wealth, power, and comfort.
Sure, we all want to be the emperor.
But if everyone is the emperor, there are no farmers to grow the food, there are no builders to make the palaces, and there are no subjects to rule over. The hierarchy just completely collapses. There'd be no balance, and therefore no order.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So by pointing out the absurdity that a dog doesn't simply will itself into becoming a human, and a commoner can't simply will themselves onto a throne, the text attempts to prove that personal willpower is a destabilizing illusion. The life program has to be predetermined, because if we could rewrite our own code, we would crash the system.
Wow. It is a terrifying thought for anyone who values control. But I can also see how it might be a massive psychological relief for someone who feels overwhelmed by the pressure of modern life. If you can't steer the train, you don't have to stress about the destination.
Right, you just sit back and look out the window.
But speaking of destinations, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if every single person is running this inescapable software, that software inevitably has to shut down, right? The text places a tremendous emphasis on the end of the line, which is death.
It does, and it uses death as the ultimate proof of this system's absolute rigidity.
And the author specifically calls out wealthy and influential people in this section, which is something we see constantly in our modern world, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You have tech billionaires pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into biohacking, trying to de-age their bodies or trying to figure out how to, upload their consciousness to a server. They desperately want to live. They want to buy their way out of the biological progression.
But the text frames this desire to live forever not just as a medical impossibility, but as a fundamental violation of the system itself.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author provides a deeply mechanical justification for why mortality is absolutely required. The text isn't just saying death is sad but inevitable. The author writes, if the people before you do not die, there will be no way forward for those who come after.
So it's about making space.
Exactly. In the context of this worldview, death is not framed as a personal tragedy. It isn't some deep spiritual mystery or a punishment for sin. It is simply a maintenance protocol.
A maintenance protocol, like clearing the cache on your web browser.
That is exactly it. It's a cosmic conveyor belt. The old code must be wiped from the system so the new code can be executed. It's the ultimate equalizer, leveling the billionaire and the peasant. But its primary function is purely utilitarian.
Because there's only so much room.
Right. The universe has limited bandwidth. The life program can only continue functioning across generations if the older generation is mechanically removed from the board. Resisting death through extreme wealth or biohacking, that's seen as a refusal to step off the conveyor belt when your time is up.
So we have this intensely mechanical view of a single human life. But then the author takes that localized view of a dying billionaire and just abruptly scales it up to a terrifying degree.
The jump in scale is wild.
It is. The scope of the argument zooms out from a hungry stomach straight to celestial mechanics. The text outlines this massive progression. It says the moon revolves around the earth revolves around the sun while rotating on its axis, and the entire solar system follows the movement of the Milky Way. It draws a direct, unbroken conceptual line from the necessity of human digestion to the rotation of entire galaxies.
And to stitch those two extreme scales together, the microbiology and the macrocosmos, the author relies on a very specific cultural idiom.
Oh, right, the animal one.
Yeah. The text states, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and the offspring of mice dig holes. Now, traditionally, this is just a phrase about genetics, right? Inherent traits, staying in your lane, that kind of thing. But look at how the author deploys it here.
It's totally different in context.
By placing this idiom about mice digging holes right next to the physical laws governing the Milky Way, the text performs a really fascinating philosophical maneuver.
It basically equates biological determinism with astrophysics.
Yes. It argues that a mouse digging a hole is not making a choice. It is acting under the exact same unyielding physical laws that force the moon to orbit the Earth.
So there's no choice anywhere.
None. The moon doesn't decide to orbit, and the mouse doesn't decide to dig. In this text, genetics, physics, and astronomy are not separate fields of study. They're all just different dialects of the exact same language of order. The universe is presented as one single, perfectly synchronized clock.
So if we have this all-encompassing synchronized clockwork, and everything from a corporate business license to the orbit of the sun is locked into place, where does that leave human agency? Because the text concludes with a massive spiritual ultimatum based on acknowledging this order, and it presents what it claims is the undeniable proof of the greatest creator.
Right, because up until the conclusion, the text is purely descriptive. It's just telling you how the machine works.
Yeah, the blueprints.
But in the final section, it shifts to the consequences of living inside the machine. The author outlined a strictly dualistic outcome for humanity. It states that those who respect the greatest creator and choose to live in accordance with the established order, they are permitted to enter a higher level of life space after their physical death.
And the alternative.
Conversely, those who despise the creator, who try to fight against the current and resist the order, they will inevitably descend to a lower level of life space.
So what does this all mean? Because, wait, that feels like a massive logical contradiction within the text's own framework.
How so?
If my life program is completely predetermined, like if I'm a mouse and I have absolutely no choice but to dig a hole, how can I be spiritually judged for doing what I was programmed to do? Earlier, the text explicitly stated that a pig cannot turn into a human no matter how hard it tries. We established that free will doesn't exist, so how can there be a spiritual consequence?
It is a critical paradox, you're right. And the resolution the text seems to offer is that while you cannot change your actions or your trajectory, you are judged entirely on your attitude toward your programming.
Oh, my attitude.
Yes, the mouse must dig the hole, that is the physical order, inescapable, but the spiritual order asks, does the mouse accept its role as a digger of holes with reverence for the system? Or does it spend its whole life bitterly wishing it were a phoenix?
Ah, I see.
The consequence isn't based on changing the world. It is based on whether you mentally submit to the architecture of the universe or arrogantly curse the architect.
That makes the author's final rhetorical strategy really stand out then. Because they desperately need you to acknowledge the architect. And to prove this creator exists, the text asks a really simple question. Who created this massive, inescapable order?
And then it gives you a multiple choice quiz, basically.
Yeah. It provides this incredibly bizarre, almost sarcastic list of multiple choice candidates. It asks, was this order created by our human ancestors? Was it established by an emperor from a certain ancient dynasty? Or was it the dinosaurs?
I love that they included that. Including dinosaurs is a very deliberate rhetorical trap.
It's so funny.
The author is creating a lineup of absurdities to force the reader into a corner. By grouping a prehistoric reptile, an ancient human politician, and cavemen together as potential architects of the cosmos, the text highlights the sheer impossibility of the physical world being a random accident or, a localized human invention.
Because obviously a Tyrannosaurus Rex didn't code the laws of celestial mechanics, and an ancient emperor didn't invent the biological requirement that eating food requires going to the bathroom.
Exactly. The author strips away these ridiculous options to leave you with what they present as the only remaining logical conclusion. The greatest creator.
It's a process of elimination.
Right. It's the final bow tying the entire argument together. It forces the reader to look at the sheer, terrifying scale of the system, from a corporate merger all the way to the Milky Way, and admit that something unimaginably vast must have set the clock in motion.
It is an incredibly sweeping piece of writing. I mean, we've been dissecting a worldview that attempts to explain literally everything through the lens of strict, unyielding order. We've seen how the author weaves the most mundane realities of daily life together with the life cycles of human beings and the movements of galaxies.
It connects every single dot.
It does. And they do all of this to argue for a universe where subjective human will is nothing but an illusion, where free will would cause cosmic chaos, and where the highest spiritual achievement a person can attain is simply accepting the program they have been assigned.
And, regardless of whether a listener agrees with this specific theological framework, engaging with a text this absolute is incredibly valuable.
Absolutely.
Because it acts as a profound mirror for our modern assumptions. We live in a society obsessed with agency, self-improvement, and disruption. This text forces you to stop and question, how much of our lives do we actually control?
Yeah, that really hits home.
When you feel friction in your daily routine, how much of that comes from fighting against systems, whether they are biological imperatives, deeply ingrained social structures, or simple physical realities that you are inextricably embedded in? It challenges us to honestly examine the boundaries of our own agency.
It definitely forces you to look at your daily friction in a whole new light. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today, building purely on the internal logic of the text we just explored. The author argues that desiring to avoid death violates the divine order because it selfishly prevents the next generation from moving forward on the cosmic conveyor belt.
Right, you're taking up space.
Exactly. You aren't supposed to want to stay. So based on this text's incredibly strict definition of order, where even trying to exert your will is futile and free will is an illusion, is the ultimate sin actually committing a physical crime? Or is the ultimate sin simply wishing for something outside of your predetermined trajectory?
That's a deep question.
If hoping for a different outcome goes against your assigned life program, and your attitude is the only thing you are judged on, then is human imagination itself a violation of the greatest creator's blueprint? Think about that the next time you look at the CEO of your company or the orbit of the sun and wonder what it might be like if things were just a little bit different.